regret is a name, Sergeant. The name of one of the Covenant's religious leaders, a prophet. He's on that carrier, and he's calling for help.
What's up, MetaNerds? This video will pull from every resource available. Please hit that like button, it really does help out. Let's get into the breakdown. As the Pelican is one of the most recognizable and important aircraft ever fielded by the UNSC, being the backbone of human military logistics since even before the Human Covenant War, and even well beyond it. It's more than half a century of operation. And while we call them all Pelicans, there are several major variants that exist, each reflecting the changing needs of the UNSC as the war evolved. The three best known versions, the D75, D77, and D79H, do share the same basic mission profile as heavily armed dropships capable of transporting troops, vehicles, cargo, and supplies between orbit and the planet's surface. But there's a ton of differences, and so we'll get into all that. The oldest of the three is the D75 Pelican, a model that entered service decades before the Human Covenant War, and became a very familiar and either terrifying or inspiring sight during the insurrectionist era. At around 30 meters or 98 feet long, it established the general shape that would define later Pelicans, featuring a large rear cargo bay, oversized engine nacelles, and enough lift capacity to carry armored vehicles and large troop contingents. Compared to later models, it was somewhat smaller and less refined, but it was still a formidable transport, with the usual armament being the chin-mounted autocannon and defensive weapons designed to suppress enemy infantry during landings. While it could carry dozens of troops or vehicles, like the Warthog and the Mongoose. During the insurrection era, this was more than sufficient, as most of the opponents lacked sophisticated anti-aircraft weaponry. But once the Covenant arrived, the shortcomings of the aging D-75 became apparent. Even basic plasma weaponry was cutting through these unshielded craft with frightening ease. The most heavily armed version of the D-75 is the TCG, or gunship, which mounted two wing-mounted rotary cannons and two belly-mounted cannon turrets, giving it significantly more direct firepower than many later troop-carrying Pelicans. And this comes out at a point in the insurrection era where the UNSC was finally starting to feel the pressure, seeing an ever-increasing amount of citizens taking up arms and shooting at them. And these insurgents were getting their hands on more advanced systems, and so you see an arms race where they're getting anti-aircraft weapons, and so some D-75s start working in counter anti-aircraft systems. There's also the TCR for reconnaissance version, which is trying to get it closer to the role that was often filled by the Hornet, specializing in scouting and spec ops missions. The D77 Pelican is the definitive one of the Human Covenant War. It's what we know from all the games and novels. At around 30.1 meters or 99 feet long, it's basically the same size as the D75, but it has qualitative improvements in armor, the engines, the avionics systems, and the weaponry. It of course could carry a Warthog, Mongoose, but even Scorpion, supply pallets, and 30 fully equipped troops. And depending on the mission requirements, it was often transporting Spartan teams, ODSTs, or just large specialized equipment. The armament does vary by configuration, but the standard was a powerful 70mm autocannon mounted beneath the cockpit and defensive machine guns near the troop compartment. Some variants could mount missile pods or other specialized weapons systems. If you saw the breakdown on the Phantom variants, you know that the Pelican is one of these few areas where they're actually more advanced than the Covenant. Almost every ship and vehicle of every size you could think of, the Covenant equivalent was always more deadly and had better defenses. But here, the Pelican is more deadly than the Phantoms, at least your standard Phantoms. And so many of these were made, and it could carry so many different things, that it was just this ubiquitous craft that was heralded for its versatility. Troop transport, gunship, cargo hauler, rescue craft, medical evac vehicle, orbital shuttle, and spec ops insertion platform. For a current real-world comparison, you could think of things like the UH-60 Blackhawk and CH-47 Chinook, though of course the D-77 could operate in both atmosphere and space. The newest major variant, the D79H, is actually a post-war evolution of this design. While maintaining the familiar silhouette of its predecessors, it incorporates all sorts of improvements learned during nearly 3 decades of fighting with the Covenant. Then they made it faster and gave it better maneuverability, with significantly more advanced engines and next-gen tech. And as for its armament, it still has a powerful chin-mounted cannon, but with better than ever targeting systems and fire control tech, and all sorts of additional hardpoints for more modular weapons packages. As the UNSC was now on cleanup duty, Pelicans were seeing more direct combat access than ever before. While this is the same era that gave us the enormous Infinity, really you needed to have more spread out, almost counter-insurgency type craft. And so quicker, larger, and more deadly Pelicans were more useful than ever. And to compare it to other craft, like the UNSC's F-41 broadsword, which measured around 24 meters or 79 feet long, but that was optimized for space superiority and strike missions, not this multi-purpose transport role. The Pelican's also larger than the AV-14 Hornet, which served as a light attack and reconnaissance aircraft, though it's smaller than the dedicated heavy lift transports like the D-20 Heron. That massive 127.7 meter or 419 foot long, super heavy dropship that was capable of transporting entire firebase modules and colony infrastructure. So the Pelican is kind of in between all those. You can go through space like a broadsword, clear out an LZ like in your Hornet, and move some stuff like a Heron. While Phantoms were a bit larger at around 33 to 44 meters long, and Phantoms actually had a larger number of infantry, especially in the Sangheli and Ungoi formations, but they were seen as having less flexibility when it came to transporting their vehicles. And like I said, many of them are actually less good on offense, while the Covenant's Spirit dropships would almost be like an in-between between the Pelican and the Heron. The D79H gets up to the GAU 53 70mm autocannons mounted beneath the nose, the deadliest of all, and they can mount even heavier weapons like the large caliber cannons, side-mounted machine guns and missile systems, while hitting atmospheric speeds of 900 kilometers per hour, or 559 miles per hour, which is more than 4 times the top speed of a Black Hawk. And by looking at all these versions, you can actually see the evolution of humanity's military, with the D75 being that pre-war version focused more on colonial security. With the D77, we see this desperate fight for survival during the Covenant War, and the D79 reflects this technologically advanced post-war era, where we're trying to finish the fight, mopping up all these regional warlords and Covenant holdouts. But at the core, it's still a heavily armed multi-role transport, knowing that at the end of the day, the way any territory is actually taken and secured is with boots on the ground. That's it for the breakdown. If you made it this far, please hit that like button. I could really use your help. Check out my shop linked under the video. Tons of cool stuff there, and anything you pick up helps to keep this channel running. But most important of all, remember, Pelicans inbound is either the greatest or most terrifying thing you'll ever hear. And may the domain preserve you. Always.